My name is Ron Puntil, and today is December 20th, 2025. My parents were really good parents to me, and they really cared for me and were very supportive. My dad was an immigrant from Italy. He came here when he was age 28, and he met my mother, who was also, her family was also from the same area in northern Italy in the Alps. So that's how they got together. And I had one sister. She was 2 years older than me. And we lived in Sharon, Pennsylvania, mostly when I was young. I was born in Pittsburgh, but we moved to Sharon when I was 5 or 6 because my dad went into business with one of his friends. Growing up was easy in a small town. This is obviously in the 40s when there wasn't all the turmoil that seems to be going on in 2025. It was just a nice living. My parents weren't confident in me and my sister, were very nice to us. We had lived in a new home because my dad was a builder and he built homes along with other things. My dad was actually a bricklayer and a mason and a stonemason, and he brought this trade with him from northern Italy. And in that trade, in here before we went to Sharon, he worked as a bricklayer. But then he and a friend of his, who was also from the same area in northern Italy, decided to form a company, and they called it M&P Construction. And they started to do masonry work. And then he also did brick and stone work on buildings and churches and various places in the greater Sharon area. So their company was very successful and were very well known in the trade industry as being good at what they did. Well, Sharon is a small town. I think at that time there was like 40,000 people that lived in Sharon. I actually lived in the suburbs called Hickory Township. So I went to Hickory High, and I played on the football team and sang in the men's choir and the men's glee club and in the choir for the school. And it was a very easy life. I don't remember any trauma or anything that I was disappointed in. And I was a good student and grew up there until I went to college. Well, a cousin of mine was at Pitt, and back in those days, you didn't shop around for universities or colleges. You kind of went to where it was close by. So nobody ever went to Florida or to California or anywhere else. So I had got accepted into Penn State and Pitt. That's the only two I applied to. And I went to see my cousin once in the summertime, and he said, "You don't want to go to Penn State. You should go to Pitt." And I didn't know anything about any colleges and had never even visited the campuses. So I said, "Sure, why not? I'll go to Pitt." So I did. And he belonged to a fraternity called Phi Gamma Delta. And because Pitt in the early 70s or early 50s did not have any dorms, so you had to find a place to live. So I moved in with my cousin and his family while pledging was going on, which lasted, I think, 3 weeks or a month. And then I moved into the fraternity house, and I lived there until I married Maureen. Well, I started in engineering because I thought I was smart enough and had good grades in high school, until I got to Pitt and found out that I wasn't that smart when it came to college math and college chemistry courses that you had to take to be in the engineering program. So a couple of years after struggling through it and failing and dropping out, I entered back in as a student in business, and that's what I graduated with, a business degree. As I say, you live in a fraternity house and you get to know 20, 25 guys, and some of them are still alive, still my friends today. So it was quite a good experience, and particularly for me, coming from a small town and not knowing what college life was like, it was quite different. I joined in ROTC because the Korean War was going on at the time, and if you weren't in ROTC or you didn't have some sort of a deferment, you were eligible for the draft. Of course, nobody wanted to go to war, so I joined ROTC. So I was in that for 4 years, and at the end of graduation, I got a commission in a quartermaster corps in the U.S. Army, and was ultimately in the reserves for 6.5, maybe 7 years, where I reached the grade of captain in the reserves. So I had a long, extended period of time in the reserves. I went to summer camp each summer, even after I was married and had kids, because it was part of the obligation I had in order to have a 6-year active duty. So ROTC was a big part of my going to classes and wearing a uniform sometime to school and marching in parades around the campus. When I graduated, the Korean War was over, and of course there were second lieutenants in ROTC all over the country who they didn't know what to do with. They didn't need any more soldiers, so they offered a program that you could go on active duty for 3 years, and you would have no more obligation to the military, or you could take a 6-month active duty program and have 6.5 years of reserves. And I chose to do that because I was married and didn't want to go into the service for 3 years. And I wanted to get started on my career. And so I didn't, I chose a 6-month program and spent 6.5 years in the reserves, which was fun. I went to meetings once a week and summer camp 2 weeks a year. And it was, they paid me and I made some money. We were broke at the time. So the payment I got from being in the reserves was part of our being able to live the way we lived, which wasn't very high end, for sure. We met because sororities and fraternities did a program in the springtime called Spring Carnival, and we put the fraternities and sororities chose a topic, and each fraternity and sorority joined with each other and put a show on, singing and dancing. So I hardly knew her at all, and we ended up doing a dance together. And of course, when you're practicing for these things, which went on for weeks, we spent a lot of time together, and we started to go out to have a Coke and drink sometimes after practice. And then I asked her out on a date. Our first date was to see the University's band concert, because it was free to students and I didn't have any money to take her anywhere. So we went to that, and I fell immediately in love with her that night. And we started to date more seriously. She had a boyfriend, and I had a girlfriend in Sharon, and we both broke up with them and started to date seriously. And after I graduated, I asked her to marry. Before I graduated, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. We got married in June 8th, 1957. It was a lot of fun, and I was very interested in a sorority. She lived at home because Pitt at that time was a commuter school, and those of us who lived in fraternities, or a few that lived in houses, ramshackle houses around the Pitt campus, lived there. But most people that were at Pitt in those days were in their homes in various towns around Western Pennsylvania. And she drove to college with her brother, who was 2 years older than her, and she was involved with her sorority, very much involved. And of course, going back to Spring Carnival, she won the vote to become Spring Carnival Queen the year that we put Spring Carnival on before we were married. So she was very pretty and very active and interesting and fun to be with. I gave her a box with white gloves in it for Christmas, and on one of the gloves I put a diamond ring. So there was no going to see her parents, which she never forgave me for, nor did I ever get on my knee and ask her. She opened up the present, of course, and saw the ring, and she said, "Is this ring for me?" And I said, "Of course it's for you." And she said, "You want to marry me?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Okay." That's how we did it. Because I was still in college and she had graduated, she had a job teaching school in Sharpsburg. And we moved into an apartment house on Weinbittle Street, which is in the general area of where West Penn Hospital was. And we lived there for the first year we were married. And then my dad and his friends started to help build a house for us in Penn Hills. So we ultimately moved in there, but like any married couple in those days, nobody had any money. And we scraped around trying to pay our rent and off of her salary, because I was still going to class. My senior year, I only had classes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So it was making the adjustment wasn't easy. Being married after having lived in a fraternity house and being, a party guy and drinking and raising hell, it wasn't easy to be married the first year. But we got through it somehow. We fought a lot, but we got through it, or bickered a lot, I guess we would say. But we always laughed about it after we had a fight, and we made so much noise yelling at each other that we would open the door and look out the door to see if our neighbors in our apartment were in the hall, and then we would run out the door because we didn't want anybody to see us that we were arguing all the time. But we lasted 66 years, so we must have been doing something right. I got a job. I took a test to become a salesman for life insurance. It was a company called Provident Mutual, and they had a program called Campus Agents. So you got licensed with the idea that you were going to be a salesman for life insurance when you graduated from college. When I graduated in June, I had to go on active duty the following January. So I graduated in June of '57. In January of '58, I had to go on active duty. So I tried to sell insurance in that 6-month period, and I was very unsuccessful at it and hated it, because you're on the phone calling people telling me you're trying to sell them insurance, and they didn't want to buy it, of course. So I went into the service and spent 6 months, and when I got out, I got a job with Jones and Laughlin Steel Company as a industrial engineer, because I had taken industrial engineering courses when I was at Pitt. So I worked there for 2 or 3 years, and I didn't like that either. So I got a job with a friend of mine with Allstate Insurance, not selling insurance, but in the regional office here. And during that period of time that I worked there for 3 or 4 years, I got promoted, and one of the jobs I had was to go out and find offices for Allstate to claims offices. So I had that on my resume, and I got a job with a company that built office buildings, and they hired me to lease space in a building they were building in not in Cranberry Township, but in the South Hills. So I started working for Oliver Tyrone, and I spent my whole career with them, or with the company that we formed while we were there, called Oliver Realty, and that was my whole career in commercial real estate. So I was very successful. We had a great company that was clearly a dominant company in commercial real estate in Pittsburgh in the 70s or 80s. So yeah, I did well. I started in sales, and I was able to sell. So if you can sell, you can always make a living. I certainly wasn't good at selling insurance, but I was good at selling office space. I got transferred to Chicago to rent a building that was a spec building, which means in our lingo that the building has no tenants. And the building was actually 28 stories high, and 280,000 square feet with no tenants. And I was able to successfully fill that building with tenants. And while I was there is when Oliver Realty was formed. So they brought me back as the vice president in charge of leasing for that company. And the various leasing guys that we hired reported to me. And we leased not only Oliver Tyrone's buildings, but Oliver really started leasing buildings and managing buildings for other building owners in the greater Pittsburgh area. So we formed an office in Philadelphia because Oliver Tyrone had an office there, or had a building there. And we formed an office in Detroit because we were able to get an assignment from Prudential Insurance Company in Detroit. And we had an office in Princeton, New Jersey, because Prue gave us a job there. And we had an office in Tampa, Florida for a while, all of which were to do leasing and management work for other owners other than Oliver Tyrone. So we worked in that field for many, many years and very successfully at it. People skills are something that you develop along the way, or some of them are born in you. That you like people, you get along with people, you can relate to them, and that's part of sales. You don't sell to people who don't like you. People buy things from you because in addition to wanting your product, whatever it is, they like the salesperson, or they trust them. That's another concept of being a good salesperson, somebody that people trust. That when you tell them something, they believe it and don't believe that you're lying to them or kidding them or BSing them. So all of that fits into successful sales. And everybody in some degree or another, no matter what you do in your life or your career, are selling. You're selling yourself, or you're selling a product. And whether you're a lawyer trying to sell a jury on your defense, or your salespeople like my son Dan or my son Glenn, who have been very successful at what they do, or even my daughter Susan, because they have those traits as part of how they were raised and they're part of how they were learned growing up. Well, we got married in, I said before, in June 8th of 1957. She was very involved in her religion and believed that it was a sin to practice birth control. So we had 4 kids in 5.5 years. By that time, we had moved into our house in Penn Hills with the 4 little kids, and we lived there, I think, for 5 or 6 years. When we moved to Pennhurst, which was a community in the eastern part of the city, the company had joined me into a country club, which was part of the perks that they gave. And so we moved in a very nice home with 5 bedrooms. So each of the 4 kids had their own bedrooms. And they went to a school, grade school, that they could walk to, called Gray School. And they also went to junior high, and to Wilkes Junior High, because they could walk to that from our school. So they were involved in their growing up, and like 4 kids as close together as they were, they fought and argued and stomped around sometimes, but all in all really loved each other, and we had a lot of fun with them. Some were easier to raise than others, but they were all good students, got through school with decent grades, and we're in trouble from time to time, and with teachers who, some of them were wise guys, and Maureen would be a substitute at school, and she would go there not only to substitute, but check up on them, and would find out that they were wise guys in class and smart alecks and all those kind of things. But we had a lot of fun with them, and we went on vacation to Myrtle Beach with other couples that were Maureen's sorority sisters, and that went on for many, many years. So all in all, we had a great time raising kids, and we loved them dearly. and still do. I was getting close to retirement, and even though I was still getting a paycheck from Oliver Tyrone, we had sold our company to to Grabanellis, and not the Oliver Tyrone group, but Oliver Realty. We sold that company to Grabanellis, and as a part owner of that of Oliver Realty, I got a little bit of money when we sold. So one of the things we did with that money was buy a condo in Florida at a place called Stonebridge, and we started the vacation there even though I was still working. So after a while, we decided that after I would retire that we would spend some time there in Florida, and we would spend the winters there and play a lot of golf. Maureen became a good golfer at Edgewood Country Club that we were members of, and so the two of us played a lot of couples golf, not only at Edgewood but in Florida, and took many, many golfing vacations, the two of us. We went to California, played at many fancy golf courses out there, and did a lot of golfing locally with couples. We'd go on golfing trips each summer with the people from Edgewood. So golf was a big part of our lives, and we enjoyed it immensely, and both of us were reasonably good at it. The four kids, of course, all graduated from Churchill High School, or in Susan's senior year, it became a school called Woodland Hills. But anyhow, they all graduated, and each of them went to college. Ronnie to Villanova, Dan to Teal, Susan and Glenn to Penn State. And each of them graduated in 4 years and got their degrees, and we were very proud of them, and they all did very well in college. And subsequent to that, Ronnie went to law school, and Susan and Glenn both went to MBA school at Pitt. So, but all of them did very well in school and thrived in college and enjoyed it, and they were never a problem. They went to class and I guess behaved themselves. So, yeah, we were very proud of that. And then, of course, as they graduated from college and started to date, they all met their future wives or husband, and Uncle Dan got married first, and then Ronnie and Cheryl got married second, Susan third, and then Uncle Glenn last. So they've all had successful marriages, and then their children started to be born. Claire was first born, and Tommy was the youngest. So there were 9 of them, and each of them moved into their own homes. The kids started their schooling in the areas that they lived in, and we're all successful. And proud things that I have is that everybody went to college. All you kids went to college and graduated. I mean, that's remarkable. Not Tommy, he will graduate, but you know, everybody did well in college, and you know, that's quite a accomplishment as a family, if you think about that. That all 9 grandchildren have finished college, or in Tommy's case, will finish in a few months, and it's quite an accomplishment. And so we were involved in many college and high school graduations, many activities, course, high school choral groups, and a lot of little league games, and all the activities, because we all lived in the same city, and we were lucky to have kids that stayed here and wanted to be a part of the Pittsburgh area. So we were involved in their lives, and still are, and it was a very important part of our lives. And so we spent time in Florida, of course, a good deal, but still obviously stayed here in Western Pennsylvania. guess I look back and was proud of the career I had and the success I had, because when you come from a small town, you know, I think you have dreams, but none, my dreams were certainly answered in spades. I never believed that I would be a president of a company, or that I was be active in an industry that I was well known in, and had sponsored many people that became successful in the same industry, and so I'm very proud of the career that I had. But I guess I'm mostly proud of the marriage that I had, and the children that I have, and the grandchildren I have, because that's really what you get measured for in life is, you know, not how much money you make or how much successful you have, or how big a house you live in, or how fancy a car you live in, but the legacy that you leave behind. I'm proud of that.